Hey everybody, welcome back to Writing with Miss Maxie. I hope you're having a great day and you're ready to keep going in our writing process. So let's review the materials you'll need today and our I can statements. Today you will need your I Ready writing book and a pencil. Our I can statements are I can read and understand to source text. I can identify characters, setting, and events. And I can locate details to use in a narrative. Let's look at where we are on our writing path. Here's Herschel. Hi, Herschel. Monday we did step 1, yesterday we worked on step 2, and we are moving right along to step 3, read and gather evidence. Read your text and gather information to use in your writing. Think it through, show what you know, and get ready to write. Are we ready to write? I think so. Okay, we're gonna open up our books to page 44. Let me show you what that will look like. Page 44, it will look like this. It will say step 3, read and gather evidence. Seeing Differently by Amy Lynn. So make sure you are on this page. And today we're gonna start learning more about Helen Keller by reading one of our source texts. This text uses mostly words to tell the story, and tomorrow we're going to read a text that used mostly pictures, kind of like we did with the Oglala. First, we read My Dad Lives History, and then we read Nature's Resources. The first one had a lot of text, the next one was mostly pictures. So first, we're going to read this as a reader, and next we'll go back and read it again as a writer. This time we're just reading, just to learn what it's going to tell us. So I'll read and you can follow along. Seeing Differently by Amy Lynn. Helen Keller was born in Alabama in 1880. She got very sick as a baby. Her sickness left her blind and deaf. She could not see or hear. A teacher named Anne Sullivan came to work with Helen. She tried to teach Helen words. She made signs for letters on Helen's hand. For many weeks, Miss Sullivan was unsuccessful. Then one day, she had an idea. Okay, so here's Helen Keller and here's Anne Sullivan. Anne Sullivan. Helen understood the letter signs that I made on her hand, but she did not know that the letters formed words. I tried many different words. Then one day, we walked near the water pump. I put Helen's hand under the cool stream and I made the letter signs for W-A-T-E-R, water, in her other hand. I repeated this many times. Helen's face lit up. She danced with joy. Finally, Helen knew the letters I wrote in her hand meant water. Okay, so we have read as a reader. Let's just do a couple of questions really quick to make sure we understand before we move on. So, who are Helen Keller and Anne Sullivan? You can pause your video, whisper your answer. You can rewind if you need to listen again. So Helen Keller is a deaf and blind child, and Anne Sullivan is her teacher. Okay, my next question for you is, what was Anne Sullivan trying to teach Helen? What was Anne Sullivan trying to teach Helen? That's right. Anne Sullivan was trying to teach Helen to recognize words by forming letters in Helen's hand. Okay, now we're going to read this paragraph as writers this time. And as we're going, I want you to underline details about the characters and the setting. Okay, here we go. Seeing Differently by Amy Lynn. Helen Keller was born in Alabama in 1880. She got very sick as a baby. Her sickness left her blind and deaf. She could not see or hear. A teacher named Anne Sullivan came to work with Helen. She tried to teach Helen words. She made signs for letters on Helen's hand. For many weeks, Miss Sullivan was unsuccessful. Then one day, she had an idea. Okay, so let's, if you haven't already, let's underline our character and our setting. So our character is Helen Keller. We also have Anne Sullivan as a teacher. She's a teacher. She's also a character. And what is our setting? Can you find it? Yes, it's in Alabama in 1880. So we have our characters, we have our setting. Do you see any details about the characters? I see that Helen Keller had a sickness that left her blind and deaf. And I see a detail about Anne Sullivan that she was a teacher. So I'm going to underline those. Let's read the next page as a writer and see if we find any more details about the characters or the setting. So remember to pause your video if you need more time to finish underlining on this page. Okay, let's read. Anne Sullivan. Helen understood the letter signs I made on her hand, but she did not know that the letters formed words. I tried many different words. Then one day we walked near the water pump. I put Helen's hand under the cool stream and I made the letter signs for W-A-T-E-R in her other hand. I repeated this many times. Helen's face lit up. She danced with joy. Finally, Helen knew the letters I wrote in her hand meant water. So did you guys notice any characters or details about the setting here? It named Anne Sullivan again and Helen, who are our characters. Our setting could be near the water pump. And a detail about Helen is that she finally knew that the letters meant water after Anne Sullivan taught her. Since this story about Helen Keller is all the way from 1880, over 100 years ago, there's some things I'm not really sure about, like how it said that they were at a water pump. So let's look up a water pump to make sure we understand what it is. Okay, so it looks like a water pump is something they had to use. They had to pump to get water. They couldn't just turn on a sink like we do today. Now let's go back to our reading and talk about this part right here on page 45. Who is telling this part of our story? It says I made on her hand and I tried and I put and I wrote. So who's talking here? in this part of the narrative? That's right, it's Anne Sullivan, because we know that Anne Sullivan was Helen Keller's teacher. And so when she says, Helen understood the letter signs I made on her hand, we know that it's coming from Anne Sullivan's point of view because she uses the word I, and she tells us about something she helped Helen with. Okay, my next question for you is, why did Anne Sullivan pump water into Helen's hands? Feel free to listen to the story again, pause your video, look for more text evidence, whisper your answer to the screen. You might have said that Anne Sullivan pumped water into Helen's hands to show Helen that she was writing the letters for water, W-A-T-E-R, on Helen's hand. And what did Helen do at the end right here? What did Helen do? It says that Helen's face lit up. She danced with joy because she finally understood that Anne Sullivan was writing water on her hand. She realized that the letters Anne Sullivan wrote on her hand spelled out water. So just like in Seeing Differently that we just read, when we write our own narrative paragraphs, we're going to be retelling events in our paragraph. So we can mark some really key and important events in our example, our reading. Like I think a key event is that Helen could not see or hear. I also think it's important that Anne Sullivan made letters on Helen's hand and when she had an idea, because that idea is what led Helen to understanding that letters form words. On this page, you can go through and underline what you think the key events are, and then I'll show you what I put. I think it was important when Anne Sullivan put Helen's hand under the cool stream and made the signs for water, because then Helen's face lit up and she finally knew that the letters meant water. So that's what I chose to underline, but it's okay if you picked another key important event from our story. And that is pretty much all I have for you for writing today. So you just have your quick write left, and I want you to upload your answer to Schoology. I want you to respond to this question. How does the writer show the important details about this event? How does the writer show the important details about this event? So, I mean, you could say many different things. We have the pictures, we have the writing from Anne Sullivan, where she's talking about herself. She's speaking in first person by saying I. We have the text details. There's a lot of ways that the writer showed us important details about this event. So pick a few out and upload your response to Schoology, and I will see you tomorrow. Have a great afternoon. Bye, everybody.